Hello, this is Brian. Today is Tuesday, June 21st, 2022, and I am here in Rose Canyon in San Diego, just east of La Jolla. And I want to do a spotlight on shrubs and vines. Why am I saying shrubs and vines? Because the plant I'm about to feature grows as both. And this is a plant that I probably should have spotlighted a long time ago. I sure as heck talk about it a lot when I'm hiking in low elevation areas below 5,500 feet. So our plant of today is one plant that every hiker should be familiar with. You can probably guess what I'm talking about already by looking at this leafy herbage over here. Yes, finally, it is time to spotlight Western poison oak. And this is Toxicodendron diversilobum. So, Western poison oak is one of a good few to several species of the genus Toxicodendron. It is a drought and winter-deciduous shrub or vine, depending on where it's growing, and it's a member of the Cashew Family, the Anacardiaceae. So I have talked about this plant a lot in my videos. Always talk about, oh, I gotta watch where I step. Oh, be aware, this is poison oak. Well, it's time to actually talk about this plant and not only make you aware of what it looks like, but also to talk about some of the ecology of this plant. Now, as you see here, it's kind of growing as a low thicket forming shrub right here, but it grows also as a vine and sometimes a very tall shrub. It depends on where it is growing. So let's go talk about some of the salient features of Toxicodendron diversilobum. The ones that will, for most people hoping to be able to identify this plant and avoid it, should pay attention to this part of the video a little bit more. So it is often a low-growing vine or small or low-growing shrub, and we have the old phrase, or leaves of three or leaflets of three, let it be. And this is where it comes from. Toxicodendron diversilobum out here, and then we also have Toxicodendron rydbergii, which is western poison ivy, which is not found here in Southern California. And then we have Toxicodendron radicans, which is eastern poison ivy. And then there's an eastern poison oak, I don't remember the name of it, the botanical name. But yes, leaflets of three. So there are a lot of plants that do have leaflets of three growing here in Southern California. Poison oak is probably one of the most common of them. So for people not familiar with the plant, this leaflets of three, let it be, is very good to heed. But there are quite a few plants that are very similar to poison oak. Some of them, one species is very closely related. But first, let's look at this. So you can see, I'm not getting within 6 inches of this plant. No offense. But leaflets of three, as you can see here. And as you'll notice, if you look carefully, the leaflet on top of the three has its own stalk. That is one of the defining characteristics of Toxicodendron diversilobum. So you can see this one right here. You can see very carefully, or very closely, that it has its own leaf stalk. The top one has a well-defined leaf stalk, or petiolule. It's a leaflet stalk. So that's one diagnostic feature of western poison oak. And I believe the other species might be similar, but I can't really speak on it because I'm not experienced with other ones other than Toxicodendron radicans that I used to see when I lived back east. So yes, 3 leaflets with a terminal leaflet stalk, or petiolule. And you notice that it's kind of glossy green. The glossy green, kind of a green sheen on the leaves, is another important characteristic. Because a lot of the other plants that also have 3 leaflets are very different. They don't have that. A lot of them don't have that sheen. And another thing is, Western poison oak is also not really hairy. It may have a very light purulence, or maybe a very light fuzziness on it, but it does not look distinctively hairy or bristly. Now, one thing about poison oak is we were talking about leaflets of 3, let it be. Well, I have seen Western poison oak with up to 5 leaflets. So, again, a lot of things in science are not always perfect. So far, I haven't really seen any on this plant with more than 3 leaflets, but sometimes you will get some leaves that have 5 leaflets on them. So that would make them pinnately compound. It does happen. I've seen it a couple times on Western poison oak. So it's not always leaflets of 3. Sometimes it's leaflets of 5. That's why I'm saying to be very careful. And in the winter, that's kind of what the twigs look like in the winter time. Kind of grayish. So this plant will be leafless in the winter time. It's deciduous. It sheds its leaves in fall. And in really dry areas, I'll explain that more in a little bit, it'll start shedding its leaves in the summertime. So again, these glossy plants during the growing season, the twigs can be kind of brownish, as you can kind of see there. They're kind of brownish. Very light fuzziness on them, very light, not extremely prominently noticeable. Kind of brownish, and again with the shiny green leaflets, that's one of your defining characteristics. Now, during the autumn, and also during really dry periods, the plants often turn brilliant shades of color. Now we're getting a little bit of it here because we're kind of in a very dry period right now, but this is kind of a sample of what they look like in fall. Some of these plants will turn brilliant red, sometimes pastel colored, sometimes scarlet, sometimes yellowish orange. So fall color is actually quite a spectacle on Western poison oak. It's actually one of our most attractive fall color species, especially with a lot of our deciduous trees mostly turning yellow and brown. Poison oak is actually quite a showstopper when you see it in season. But during really dry periods, extreme dry periods, they can exhibit some drought deciduousness, and they will get some flare-ups of that fall color, like right now in June, because we are in quite a drought. Once again. So you will get a little taste of it on some patches of poison oak in the middle of summer. Now towards October is when basically the rest of the plants will really light up the scene and shed their beautiful red leaves. So what happens is, when you contact the sap of this plant, which could be just as simple as a light or moderate brushing up against it, what happens is the sap contains a compound called urushiol, U-R-U-S-H-I-O-L, and I don't understand 100% of the science behind it, but what I get is, I believe it reacts with the proteins in your skin, and I think it causes your immune system or something to start attacking it, and then it causes these red blistery pustules. and you get a really nasty, painful, or itchy rash that can sometimes last a couple weeks. So that is one reason why we like to avoid messing with this plant. That's why I am not getting within 6 inches of it while I'm filming this video. So, do you notice that some of these leaflets, do you notice some of these look different? These ones have lobed edges on it. That's because poison oak leaflets can be quite distinct. Some areas are just mostly rounded, maybe slightly wavy edged. And in some leaflets like these will have lobes on them. Hence the Latin epithet diversilobum, because of the variation. Well, like I said, if you see plants with leaflets of 3 and you're not familiar with the flora, that's when I would exercise caution about getting near it. So, like I said, poison oak can sometimes have quite a variability in the shape of its leaflets. As you can see here, they're quite lobed and stuff like that. So habitat for poison oak, it's a lot more prevalent than you might think it is, because you probably hear a lot about we're entering the woodlands, entering near a creek or a woodland area, watch out for poison oak. Well, that is where you're going to see probably the highest prevalence of it, and that's where it grows its lushest, its largest. And you can see woodland situations are where it's more likely to become a vine and growing up into the bole of this California sycamore tree right here. However, they don't just grow in woodlands. You will find them in chaparral as well. Sometimes they will pop up in chaparral, especially taller statured chaparral shrubs might have some poison oak growing in them. Sometimes even in coastal sage scrub, you'll find poison oak. In fact, on this dry exposed hill right here, most of this right here, most of this at the bottom, before it gets to the brown grass, most of that is poison oak, grown as a very low growing shrub. So they can grow in sunny, dry areas as well. The ones that grow in sunny, dry areas tend to be the ones that shed their leaves earlier during the dry summer. Those are the ones I can see there's a little bit of coloration, a lot more coloration on the leaves in those versus the mostly dark, rich green color down here, because they are more exposed to drier conditions and they're more likely to shed their leaves during the summer drought. And those ones that shed their leaves during the summer drought are more likely to leaf out earlier during the middle of winter, like in February, when the rains come. So you can get poison oak growing in coastal sage scrub and disturbed grasslands. In fact, on that hill right there, that whole swath right there is poison oak. On that ridge right there, that little part where my finger's pointing, that's all poison oak. So you gotta kind of keep your eyes out looking for this plant in most situations. Now, I've never seen it above 5,400 feet yet. I've most certainly never seen it above 6,000 feet. Once you're above 6,000 feet, you're pretty safe. But again, look at the variability in the shapes of the leaflets. Now, another telltale sign is in the springtime, they get these drooping little clusters of whitish, I think 5-petaled flowers, drooping clusters, which then turn out to be these drooping clusters of berry-like fruits with little ribbing, little longitudinal lines along the side. So, and when they ripen, they're a whitish color, and they often persist on the plant long after the leaves have fallen off in the fall. So in the winter, a lot of times, if you see hanging clusters of white berries with little longitudinal lines in them, on a leafless mass of plants, you're probably looking at poison oak. Now there's this very similar species, which I've not seen in this canyon yet, unfortunately, but there is a species of sumac called skunk brush or skunk bush, and that's Rus aromatica. Like poison oak, it has the 3 leaflets as well. And so I ask you to check in the upper right hand corner of the screen for a link to my video on skunk brush, Rus aromatica, so you can see what that plant looks like. Now skunk brush has smaller but also variously lobed 3 leaflets that also turn scarlet, red, and orange in the fall, much like western poison oak. But its fruit is a reddish, round, kind of a flat on one side drupe. That's reddish color. And they don't live in hanging clusters in the interaxial part of the plant. As you see here, the poison oak, as you don't see here too well, the poison oak plants, oh, there's plenty of it around here, so poison oak plants, their berries grow in clusters along the sides of the branch or the stem. Whereas skunk brush's reddish brown drupes grow at the tip. And another interesting diagnostic feature is that poison oak does not preform next year's flower buds at the end of its twigs. It does not preform its flower buds. So you can see these twigs here, they just end in buds, just end in regular leaf buds. Skunk brush, Rus aromatica, will have a little small preset flower bud for next year's flowers. So as they go through the summer months, they preform their flower buds for the following spring months. Poison oak does not do that. So that's one thing. So that's why I suggest you check out my video on Rus aromatica so you can have some comparison and contrast. Because poison oak and skunk brush kind of often grow as low-growing, bushy, sometimes thicket-forming plants. Now, there are some spots, especially in more sun-exposed areas, where poison oak will grow like a very large upright shrub. So, especially in these sunnier areas, you're going to look for these shrubs that get pretty tall. Fortunately, where I want to show an example of that, it's none. But as you can see here, this one's starting to grow much more upright. As you can see, this is a younger plant right here. As you can see, it's growing upright. Sometimes these things can get up to about 6, 7, 8 feet, maybe even a little taller, as really large thicket-forming shrubs with gray bark, with a slight furrowing in later stems. But a lot of times you'll see like a white, kind of whitish gray bark on them. Sometimes you get a slight furrowing. You can see the twigs are gray. So during the winter time, a lot of times it's gray. The twigs are grayish brown, and you'll see clusters of white berries hanging from them. If you see any leafless shrubs that you're not familiar with in the winter time, keep a little bit of a distance. Again, shady areas like this, poison oak proliferates. In woodlands and thickets, and even in thick chaparral, it can grow. But it can also grow on sunny exposed sites, as I pointed out. It's actually quite common to see poison oak growing on upland hillsides. So, one little thing of warning is don't let your pets off leash when you're hiking, because if they get into the poison oak, they will have the urushiol on their fur coats, and it can transmit it to you by secondary contact. That is very much a possibility, so be careful. Technu is supposed to be a good way to wash it off. Sometimes rubbing with rubbing alcohol might help. But that's going to do it for my spotlight on western poison oak, Toxicodendron diversilobum. Hope you found this video informative and helpful in identifying one of those plants that you want to be careful with, but admire from a distance. Thanks for watching my spotlight, and I'll see you on the next episode.